Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 356 of School Librarians United. I'm your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 19th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me on Facebook on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is at LMS_United. On Threads and Instagram, you can find me at School Librarians United and on Blue Sky at SLU Podcast or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now for today's episode, Texas Freedom to Read Project and my conversation with founding member and parent advocate, Laney Hawes. So, friends, we're in for a treat. We've got Laney Hawes with us today from Texas, and you are going to recognize right away who she is because she has been on the big screen of The Librarians documentary. She is famous, and many of us have watched The Librarians through tears and just awe and admiration and respect. You're a parent advocate. I'm so grateful when this documentary was created that your voice was featured because what we do is enhanced greatly through the support of our parent community and our school community. And you were one of the most prominent voices, which thankfully was featured in the Librarians documentary. So Laney Hawes, first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I laugh because you say I'm famous and because my kids, as I've been more on the news and doing interviews and doing the film, my young kids every once in a while say, "Mom, are you famous?" And I'm like, not really, like amongst a small group of people. So yes, maybe amongst school librarians, you could maybe consider that. But, here in Texas, the right people really dislike me. So we'll take that as a win, right?
Absolutely. So, let's dive in a little bit to the reason why you were chosen to be on this documentary. And many of us have seen it multiple times. Many of our listeners, when they look at some of the promotions, you have been included in promoting the Librarians, and you went to South by Southwest.
Yes, and I've been able to travel with the film a little bit, right? So I also did the ALA presentation. I have traveled all over the state of Texas, and I've done a lot of interviews and kind of marketing for the film nationwide. Yeah, I've been a huge piece of that when we do big nationwide online visits per se and screenings. I always get to be a part of that. And, one of the reasons that, and I'm not a librarian, and so I don't want to always take that space because this film really is about what's happening to librarians. But every time we do a screening, even when we did it for librarians, then at the end, when there's a Q&A, the first question is always, well, what can we do about it? Right? And that's where I am uniquely positioned to say, well, here I am. I want to talk to you about that. Like that is the question I am here to answer because I'm not the librarian. I don't have a job that I have to keep and that I have to protect, right? And I don't have any purpose except for to protect the freedom to read. Whereas librarians have a purpose to serve their communities. Like school librarians, your purpose, you shouldn't have to be wasting all of your time with all of this garbage. Your focus is actually on the students in the school that you serve. And so you don't want to be spending all of your time being an advocate or an activist. Now, there's room for it a little bit, but that's my job, right? I'm the parent. And interestingly, well, not even interesting, frustratingly enough, this movement to attack librarians, to pull books off of shelves has all been done in the name of parents' rights. That is right. That is the excuse. That's the reason they say they do it. And so here I am. a parent, a mother of 4 children in public schools in Texas. And I'm here to say, if this is a parents' rights movement, you do not speak for me because you are violating my children's rights and you are taking away my parental rights. And that's where my power is, right? And so that's who I am. That's why I'm involved. And that's why I'm uniquely qualified to answer the question, what can you do? And as the process has gone along, a few years after I jumped into this work, just very uniquely and organically in my children's school district, I met a few other people really on Twitter before it was the cesspool that it is today. I met fellow Texans who were doing the same thing in their school districts, right? And we realized very quickly, oh my gosh, this is the exact same fight, the exact same battle, the same books, the same speeches. This is coordinated, it's funded, and if they're coordinated, we need to coordinate as well, right? We keep reinventing the wheel in every school district as we're fighting this. And that's where I met up with Ann Russey, who lives in the Houston area, Katy ISD, and Frank Strong, who's an AP English teacher in the Austin area. Truly, we met as friends. We were DMing each other on Twitter, and we decided we need to do something about this, right? And we talk about how we kept wondering, like, who should we turn to? Who should we ask? We've called the ACLU of Texas. We've called the American Library Association. We've called the Texas Library Association. They can, help us a little bit, but they can't do anything for us. Who's going to do it? And it was like, oh, my gosh, it's us. Oh my gosh, it's us. We have to do it. We have to fight this. And there were so many other people in Texas asking the same questions. And we thought, we're going to create an organization where we help other parents because sadly, we've become true experts, right? We know school district, school board policy, acquisitions policy. Who knew I would become an expert in library acquisitions policy and collection development, right? We've become an expert in filing public information requests. We understand where the fight is coming from. We know the organizations who are preparing the parents to come and scream at librarians. And it's like, okay, we are going to teach our fellow parents in Texas and now truly across America, because we're getting involved, we're going to teach them how to fight this locally. And that's how we decided to form Texas Freedom to Read Project. And that was a few years after we'd been doing it ourselves. But that's when we were like, we need to create something official. And in the middle of all that, I also happened to be, in this documentary, The Librarians. And that was filmed, I think, a year and a half, 2 years before we even founded this organization. That was filmed in the fall of 2020. My portion was filmed in the fall of 2022, right? Here we are in the winter of 2026. I can't believe that, it's been that many years in some ways. But here we are. And that's really what I'm excited to talk about today, is talking to school librarians and regular librarians. I'm sure you have a lot of public librarians who listen. But we want to give you some advice and some tips and some strategies on how to combat this in your communities. We want to teach you one of the most frustrating things we've found, and this is not the fault of librarians, is that because librarians are under such duress and pressure, and they're terrified of becoming a Martha Hickson, like from the movie, right? Of what happened to Julie Miller, of what happened to, Audrey Wilson Youngblood. They don't, or Amanda, right? We all know what happened to Amanda in Louisiana. They don't want that to happen to them. And so what's happening is librarians across America are making decisions out of fear and under duress, and they don't have the tools or anywhere to go to know how to handle what's happening. And we here exist to give you some of those. We want to protect librarians, but also empower you to do what you can. We recognize that librarians have jobs, and we recognize that many of you have to pay a mortgage. This isn't, yes, you love to be librarians and you believe in the freedom to read and many of you are willing to fight really hard for it, but you also have bills to pay and mouths to feed. That's the reality. And you can't just be like, let's let go, I'm going to lose my job for this. Even if you want to, you still have to feed your families, right? We understand that. And so anyway, I hope that's what we get to talk about a little bit today, is the levels and things that librarians can do and how we can prepare you to lift where you stand and do what you can, right? And so we'll keep chatting about that, but I'm just excited to be able to share that.
So many things. All right. So
many
things. So many things. What strikes me, first of all, is how offensive it must be. And it never occurred to me, because I'm also a parent, but when somebody says that they are speaking, on behalf of parents' rights, don't you dare speak for me, because it never occurred to me that that would be the presumption there of how offensive it would be to have somebody claiming to defend me and my interests, when you absolutely are not. Do never take my name and say I'm speaking on your behalf, because you absolutely are not. So when I graduated from library school in 2007, I'm going to tell you right now, banned books and what happens when books are challenged, we spoke about it for less than one lesson. My instructor, who was a librarian in the trenches, was already a school librarian and was an adjunct professor at Wayne State University, said, listen, I'm going to tell you right now, for everything that you feel, remember that you can do nothing if you are not in the library. If you are not in the library, you achieve nothing. So if you lose your job over a book, you will not be able to you serve nobody's purpose by losing your job. And that was, I don't want to say a cowardly approach. It's a reality approach. It is this idea that if you lose your job, you will no longer be able to affect change. You will become a non-participant in whatever is happening in the school. And you are very much the example that you do not have to be a member of the staff or working as a librarian to affect change on a national level. And I love that you were brought in to be a part of the librarians, because everybody who's tuned in right now, the documentary now is widely broadcast and available for people to see. I was fortunate to see multiple screenings when it came to our conferences and when it also came to Ann Arbor in Michigan, and sit right next to Amanda Jones, because we were sitting together and enjoying this amazing, moving documentary, tears, and surrounded in a space full of advocates and allies of school libraries and of access to books. So I love this, and I'm so grateful, because as a parent volunteer, you are able to do what you're able to do because the school librarians and the librarian community receive that support and that advocacy and recognize what you are trying to do in the name of defending our students' access to books.
And one thing you said at the beginning, like, how dare they speak for me? My gosh, like that burning in my chest every time they do use that. But then the additional layer of, you don't speak for me, and how dare you come in and try and make decisions for my children while claiming it's about parental rights. I mean, I am like, you can feel, like, I can feel the burning, raging through my chest, and like smoke, do you remember like on the movie Clue, where they're like, the flames were coming out of my, face? Like, that's what it feels. I can truly feel the burning. And so I couldn't, when it started in my children's school district, and it was fall of 2021 when Matt Krause released his list. And remember, Matt Krause lives in my school district. All right. So when he brought that list out, and I'm just watching books be pulled by the dozens from my children's library, I just couldn't. I absolutely could not sit back. I find it really interesting what you'd said about this professor, and like, we need you in the library. You're not really doing us any good. There's so much truth to that. If you lose your job because of the attacks in a library, chances are the attacks are pretty bad, which means they're going to replace you with their handpicked person, probably, because the people in charge, and it's going to be much, much worse. And so we actually do want really great librarians who are in there, who can focus. We don't need librarians to be activists either, right? We actually want you to focus on your job. Right. And we're going to get into that a little bit. Although I will say, I say this. I went to a speech recently where an attorney from FIRE was speaking, and it was the Foundation for Intellectual Rights and Expression. They're ultimately a First Amendment type, kind of like the ACLU, but just for the First Amendment. They're incredible. The work they're doing is really incredible. And they were talking about college students and, the the infringement on colleges now, college campuses, the things they're able to learn in class. You're seeing it in Texas, right? They're hindering what teachers can teach. And they were also talking about librarians. And he was talking about ways to fight back. And someone raised their hand and they said, you're sharing this, but the way that people fight back, like on college campuses and libraries, might cost them their jobs, or it might cost them their enrollment in the university. What if they get kicked out? We're in this position where, and the attorney kind of went quiet. I think his name was TJ. He was speaking. And this actually really touched me because I think there was some truth, which is going to push a little bit about what we talked about, like losing your job is all bad. We do want you to keep your job. But the one thing he said was, he looked up, he went quiet for a minute because they said, what do we do? If we can't lose our jobs, we don't want to be kicked out of college. And he said, again, he went quiet. He looked around the room and he stopped and he looked up and he said, I think some people are going to have to lose their jobs and some people are going to have to get kicked out of college. And I think there's a little bit of truth to that as well, right? It's this multifaceted piece. And sometimes we have to have, kind of that sacrificial lamb up front that gets everyone's attention. So I'm not asking people to lose their jobs. And I think most of the time the best is that, you do your job. You don't put your head down and do your job. You keep your head up and do your job. And we're going to give these tips and tricks to do that. But if you're in a place where and this is I'm not asking anyone to do this at all, but I'm saying if you are in a place where it's that bad, right? And you're being asked to do things that really, that are cross a line that you cannot cross. If you decide that you do need to lose your job over it, you better go out in a blaze. If you're going to go out, call us, let's go. If you know that that's where you stand and it's time to go because you can't be there anymore. And we have seen this happen, right? You're being asked to do things that you simply are beyond what you ethically believe you can do because in most cases, that's not it. But in some places it has been. And you're like, no, ethically, and you might have a spouse or you might have another job lined up. See, this is something you can do. Let's take them down on the way out, right? So just know if you are in that position, find someone, find us. We want to help. We want to make sure we can really gain everything we can from that. Make them fire you. Right? And take notes and get records, write everything down. When they say things verbally, and this is advice for you, when they give you advice verbally that is against the law or it's against policy and they're asking you to do it, you make them write it down first. You send them an email that's like, oh, I just want to clarify what we talked about in that conversation. Is this what we're doing? Because I was a little bit confused. You make them reply and say, yep, that's what we said. Whatever it takes. And I know here I am getting really passionate about it because we don't expect people to lose their jobs and to sacrifice that. Just know that that's not what's expected. But at times it might be the situation for that. And if it is, let's go, right?
Well, and I like what you said because, 2 weeks ago, we had an important conversation about dealing with conflict in our administrators. And it was from multiple perspectives of school librarians. And consistently, it was a great deal about documenting. Because regardless if you are organized and you belong to a teachers union like I do, or you work in a district where there isn't, it isn't organized and it doesn't have a union.
Like the whole state of Texas.
Exactly, right? Precisely. Having things documented, time-stamped is going to carry much more gravitas and weight than I remember, I think we had this conversation and it was in the hall, but I don't remember what day or what time or who said what. So no, that's an absolute imperative that it's been documented. And everybody tuning in right now knows people in our profession who have either left the profession, who have resigned, or who have moved to friendlier spaces where they can be the school librarian that they want to in relative safety. I say relative because they are in a place that's far less a concern. There was a very important picture of books that had been pulled from in Florida. The books that had been pulled from Florida. This is, again, back when Twitter was not a cesspool, but a place where we could share and collaborate and in real time realize. So that morning I was teaching my students, and I was in my high school, and this picture was, and I'm not going to say who posted this picture, but it was here is a cart of books I've had to pull from my collection because I have been ordered to by my administrators. I took a picture of that tweet. I put it on my lesson for my students, and I said, I want you to look at this book cart carefully. And we zoomed in, and I pointed to every book, and I said, we have this, 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 I'll buy this, I'll buy this, I'll buy this. We don't have this, but I'll buy it. And I said, I have somebody in Florida who has just left their job because they were not allowed to have these books on the shelf. You can go over to the shelf right now and check them out. And it was from a place of privilege because I teach in a very liberal, blue Democrat, not just state, but county and city. And I don't have the same kinds of immediate threats to me. But to be able to look at something that was happening on Twitter and to be able to transfer that to a lesson that I was using with my students and say, listen, you have to know that there are kids in this country right now who cannot access these books in their school libraries because they are not allowed to read them because some parent has decided that they don't want their child to read these books, but they also don't want anybody's child to read these books. And I said, you know what? I'm going to put these out so you can read them. I'm going to take them and put them in a spot. So if you want to read them, I'm going to label them and just say, hey, these books are banned in other states. Please feel free to read them. And every principal candidate and every superintendent we've hired in the last 5 years has had to walk past this display and has to be okay with the fact that we are not only going to have these books, but we are going to promote them in a way that people realize these books should be available for our school community.
Well, I think it's important, too, for students to know, if you're going to say what's happening in other places, right? Which ideas they want silenced. So much of this movement, too, is this claim that, oh, it's just about protecting the children. It's just about keeping sexually explicit material away from children. But that has been the door they're using to get in, right? And then what you see is that's not what it's about. That is not the only books that they're pulling, right? Well, and we see that even though the Llano, Texas case, which most librarians know, even though Llano it's not a school library, but it's a public library. I'm sorry, Larry the Farting Leprechaun is not sexually explicit. Nor is the book Cast, nor is a book about, the foundings of the KKK. And so you're starting to realize maybe this isn't actually just about sexually explicit material. But, I'm glad you mentioned that you have that display and that you say, if you here are the books you can read. So I would like to share with librarians really a conversation piece and a really important tool that we use when we talk to people who are concerned about libraries and the books that are there. And this is really big, and I want every librarian to write down this phrase if they can. And it's voluntary inquiry, right? A library is a place of voluntary inquiry. These books, when we talk about libraries, we're not talking about curriculum that's in the classroom. We're not talking about forced reads. We're not talking about teachers teaching this. We're not saying students have to read this. And that is a distinction, and it's a really important distinction to make when you're talking to your principals or your school boards or parents who are like, teachers are teaching this, you're forcing this on children. No. And if a librarian is forcing things on kids, students, then there might be a problem there, right? But you can make, this is a place of voluntary inquiry. This is a place where students can choose or choose not to read it. And so it's really important. And I like to bring that up as well. We often hear people come and say, well, I tried to read a piece of this book at a school board meeting and they wouldn't let me. And that's proof enough. If I can't read it at a school board meeting, then it shouldn't be in the library. Well, no. Like we said, this is voluntary inquiry. And some people might not want to read about a sexual assault for a number of reasons. And I don't know what those reasons are, and it's none of my business, but it's not our place to force it on anyone. So when you're reading that book in a public space, like at a school board meeting, that's wrong because you're forcing it on someone like it would be if it were curriculum. Also, you don't know the age range of everyone in that room. And we all agree a book with truly sexually explicit content shouldn't be with elementary school children. It is not age relevant. It's not. And so that's why you can't read it at a school board meeting, because the people in that room didn't choose to read it. They don't want to read it. We agree this material is sensitive. We agree not everyone wants it. We agree not everyone, it's not appropriate. It might not even be appropriate for one 17-year-old where it is appropriate for another. We agree not all materials are appropriate for all students at every age. And so anytime you hear that, you say, yeah, because this is voluntary inquiry. That's what we're protecting here, right? And you're doing that and you're not giving anyone in the room the chance to choose. You're throwing it at them. And that is inappropriate, right? So anyway, so I want us to remember these conversations, and I want librarians to kind of have these ready to talk about, because when you realize that, you're like, oh yeah, of course that makes sense, right? But in the moment, the point they're trying to make, well, if I can't read at a school board meeting, well, this is why. And it makes sense.
That's just the shock value. That's just the shock value. They're just trying, because, and those lists with the page numbers have been circulating now for years. A little armchair activist playbook that has been circulating around on Facebook especially. But, making sure that the people who want to be indignant and stand up and get their 3 minutes in front of the board are going to do so by reading from chapter and verse of certain books which they have pulled exclusively, entirely out of context. But again, like you said, irrespective of the context of the setting of where you are, there's nothing voluntary if you are just going to be reading off of this at a board meeting. Laney, I want to make sure that we get sort of a little bit of a timeline, because you have been in the forefront of this from what I'm going to call the beginning of just how ugly this has gotten. And, and I appreciate that your children were in the district. And so this has been on your periphery.
Well, it was fall of 2021 when it really first started. Like, that's where I jumped in. It was fall of 22 that they filmed the librarians. But yeah, I jumped in fall of 2021.
And could you I'm just curious, because it's been a while, what were the ages of your children? Because, and I know this—
They've grown up.
That I was like, So for me, it's very hard because, again, speaking from the place where I am, when I watched and was listening to what was happening on the documentary in your community, my impulse was screaming, get out of that district, leave that district. You can't be in that district. And then I'm realizing, but if you're in the very red state of Texas, there is a possibility that moving one district over, or moving 10 miles, or maybe moving out of this county, I was like, wait a minute, you are in Texas. There's probably, leaving the district is probably not feasible. And again, but that was what my heart was saying. It was like, you're a mom. Get out.
Well, you know what? My gut was the exact same one. If you watch that movie with Amanda Jones, when someone is like, did you want to leave? And she's like, leave? No, this is my home, right? Well, I'm not even from Texas. I moved here in the fall of 2016. So I am not, I guess a full-blooded Texan. So in a sense, we could leave, right? I mean, and my husband and I will say, we discussed it. Right? In 2021, we'd been here for 5 years. So my children were really starting to establish, and he had a job here, right? You move where you have a job. It's a job that brought us here. We discussed it. And we said, no, this is where his job is right now. I'm going to get involved. I'm just going to fight it. I'm not going to sit here. And we decided we needed to stay in Texas. Really, it was for the job. It's right? It was not, everything was up in the air, but we had a secure job and our children had friends and we're adapting. And I said, if I have to stay here, I'm going to fight like hell. I'm not going to sit back. And that's kind of what's almost made it manageable as well, is that I do get to try and make a difference and also fight for those in my community, right? Fight for others in my community. But you're right. So if we move the district over, I don't know how many people know where I am, but I moved to Southlake, Texas, is the district that touches mine, right? And I don't know if anybody listened to my Kicks and Bot podcast about Southlake. And funny enough, Southlake, if you watch the documentary, you know the superintendent from Granbury, Jeremy Glenn? He is now the superintendent in Southlake. So like he like so he's like 6 miles from my house. So we would have to leave the area, we would have to I live in Tarrant County, Texas. I don't know if anybody follows a lot, but there's a lot going on here. And so no, I just said, no, I'm going to stay and I'm going to fight. So when this all started, I was just doing the math right here on this piece of paper. So I have a 4th grader as my youngest and I have a senior and that's my oldest. When we started in the fall of 2021, my 4th grader was in kindergarten. I had a kindergartner. I'm just realizing that, right? Which is crazy to think about that. And that means that my 7th grader was in 3rd grade, right? And my 10th grader was in 9th, 8th, was in 6th grade. Yeah. And then my other one was in 8th grade. And I had a kindergartner. She's now in 4th grade. And, I want to tell you how this all started, how I got involved. It was right after COVID. And that created this really, really volatile situation in Texas. I hadn't been super involved during COVID as a parent screaming and yelling because I thought my district was handling it quite well. I wanted my children to go to school, so I was happy they were in school, but they were taking the precaution, right? But they were, that first year back, they masked them because we didn't have a vaccine. I fully supported the decision to mask. It's the healthiest year our family has ever had. No one had strep throat. No one got a stomach bug. It was oh my gosh. I didn't love the masks, but gosh, nobody was puking and we weren't on antibiotics, right? Anyway, so we were coming out of that. We were going back to school. It would be the first time kind of going back without any masks, just jumping right back into the world. And I had a friend reach out to me. We got an email about some apps that were being limited, like Sora. I don't know if anybody's heard of Sora or Newsela. I don't even know what it's. And I got a text from a friend who is an ELA teacher who was like, "Hey, Laney, I know that you've got a powerful voice. I know that, these things are important to you." And she said, "These are being limited and I'm really concerned about why." And she's like, "I really think you should really look into it." I said, "Okay." And so I ended up calling the curriculum director for the whole district. It was like an associate superintendent. And I said, "Hey, if you could call me back." And she got on and we talked and she was really helpful. And I said, "Hey, what's going on here? I'm a little bit nervous." We start talking about restricting kids' access. I just want to know why we're doing it. What's the reasoning? You say it might come back, it might not. And she said, one of the things we found with all these apps, we used them a lot during the COVID era because if kids were at home and we were, a lot of these apps didn't have categories for ages. And so she said, our kindergartners have access to high school level content and lesson plans and things like that. She's like, we're trying to see if we can get elementary school. I said, oh, well, that makes sense. I'm okay with that. All right, well, how soon do you think you're going to find out? And we talked about it. And I went to my first ever school board meeting. And I got up and I spoke. And I said, I want to thank, the board for what you've done. I really appreciate how you've handled COVID. I want to be helpful, but I'm a little bit concerned. I got this email. I've talked to a few people, and I just want you to know that we want our children to have access to reading materials. We really want, I'm nervous about what could happen. And I spoke at it. It was great. I said, I really want you to fight for access. Not realizing that the reason they were doing this is because there were a bunch of people complaining about bad books and whatever. I went to the next school board meeting because it was heating up a little bit, kind of said the same thing. And then within a few weeks, Matt Krause released the list. And I think it was a school board meeting later. I went and somebody had found genderqueer on a bookshelf. They'd called the news. And up until that point, I'd gone to these school board meetings. They were boring. There was almost nobody there. I walk into this school board meeting and I was like, it was like the Oscars. You know what I mean? With a sense the wall of cameras. There were people, posters. There were visual aids, wagons full of books. I still will remember, and be careful if you have children listening. I still remember one of the posters a woman was holding that said, Keller ISD, reading, writing, arithmetic, and blowjobs. And I was like, what? Anyway, and then all these people were speaking with wagons full of books. They're screaming. We have pastors calling everyone to repentance. And I am like, this got out of hand really fast, right? And it was all after that, it all just went it went crazy. It went haywire. I think I've missed 2 or 3 school board meetings since, ever. I don't miss them anymore. I go to every single one, which is a lot. It's a lot of work, but I'm going to be there, right? I want to hold them accountable for what they're doing. This is when, and this is what ties into the movie The Librarians, unbeknownst to me, this was all planned. This was all planted. This was all created because they had been, Patriot Mobile, this PAC, had come in behind the scenes and they said, we need to take over all these school boards in the community. And in the surrounding, we were all 4 school districts. We all touch each other. We're going to take over 4 school districts. We didn't know. Of course, why would I be thinking this is happening? It's a secret at this point still. They've come into our communities. They have interviewed people in our communities who they believe will best represent their values. And then they have handpicked them already. And they've promised we will pay for, we will endorse you. We will run these huge campaigns. So we're thinking, we're watching this happen. We're watching, and I'm like, whoa, I know we have a school board race coming up. I've never been super involved. I realize we have some incumbents and we know somebody who's running. And I'm like, I'm going to support you. I'm going to help. I'm going to knock doors. I'm going to do what I can. I start a Facebook group. I start a Facebook page. And the school board races election season started. And within a few weeks of it starting, we started getting these mailers. And it was like, what's this? Who's Patriot Mobile? And we couldn't beat it.
Well, and friends, this was, it has since, sort of I want to say the autopsy of the 22 midterm elections. 2022 were the midterm elections of Joe Biden's election after Trump had lost in 2020. And so the playbook that was being circulated broadly, because 2022 was the year that our Board of Education was taken over by the extreme right Christian coalition. And it was very unfamiliar in a community where I had not only gone to school myself, but my children had all gone to as well. So all of this very drastic swing to the right, but it was part of a playbook that had been circulated and truly caught many people unawares that the midterm strategy to win was to win at the hyper-local level. And from that point, have this manifest on a much larger scale. And so, no, this was a national phenomenon for sure, very reactionary to the loss in 2020 when Joe Biden became president.
Right. And they had, so where I live, Tarrant County is also really unique. Tarrant County is the most populous or like big, they call it urban county in America that is still red. But it's barely red, like barely hanging on. In fact, I think Joe Biden might have won Tarrant County by like 50 votes, like by like a few hundred votes. You know what I mean? Like it was. And so what happened was they truly, all these national organizations, we had CPAC, Donald Trump Jr., Steve Bannon, they were the ones calling the shots with Patriot Mobile, where we have to secure Tarrant County for the Republicans. We didn't realize that until after. Again, you're calling it the autopsy. You're looking back, right? And so they decided to funnel $500,000 into these local school board races, making these communities red again. It was the hyper-politicization. And they were like, it's the culture wars. If we can fight these culture wars, we can terrify people, get them out to vote. And they did. They were really, really successful all over North Texas and many places in America. Interestingly enough, our school board races were in May, because that's when they have them, rather than in the fall. In Texas, some are in May and some are in November. There's no rhyme or reason. Your community gets to decide. In fact, our school district just decided to change them to November. So it's weird. Whatever. But this was the plan. It was to take over hyper locally. This entire campaign was run on woke CRT library books and sexually explicit library books. That was all anybody talked about, was the library books, right? And I want to add, this is a really important piece, that in the fall of 2021, when the books were first challenged and they were preparing for this campaign, again, we didn't realize it, and they challenged 41 books in my children's school district. The first time a book has ever been challenged in the history of my school district, remember, ever. In the history of Keller ISD, no books had ever been officially challenged. But like every school district and almost every library, we have a policy in place, right? And that we had a book challenge committee. And the book challenge committee, the way it worked here, it's kind of an ad hoc committee. And every book challenge committee was a different group of people, right? And so what you would do is if you wanted to serve on it, you would fill out a Google form, right? And so we have this Google form where anybody in the community could sign up. Every committee had somewhere between 7 to 10 people on it. They needed an odd number, so it was probably like 7 to 9. It was librarians, educators, administrators, parents, and community members. And so when these 41 books were challenged, they put out a call. Hey, community, we've got this policy we've never used before, but it's time to use it. We need you to fill out this Google form if you're interested in serving in communities. So one of our jobs is let's send this far and wide with people that we know, like all over the community. It was sent everywhere. The people who wanted to pull the book sent it to all of, the people they knew, and we sent it to everyone we knew, right? We're trying to get as much community involvement as we could. And they called us up. That was it. They ended up only doing 31 book challenges because 10 of them were books that didn't even exist in our school district that were challenged, because, again, this was about lists they found on the internet. It wasn't actually about true concerns. I was called up to serve on, One Summer Day. I think that's what it's called. I always want to mix up the words, but it's a graphic novel. I was called up to serve on the challenge for The Diary of Anne Frank, the graphic novel adaptation. Both books that I served on we had to read the book in its entirety. We had to read it. We had to discuss it thoughtfully and thoroughly. We read the challenge together, and then we would decide as a committee what we decided. Well, all 31 books were voted by the committees to go back on library shelves. There were a few where I think one was switched. This can only be in high schools, and even I think one was moved to parental permission needed, right? And but none of them were voted to be pulled from school libraries. Surprise, surprise, when you thoughtfully evaluate a book. And we have found this, and I'm sharing this because I want to bring this up to librarians. When you're looking at your policies and you have input, whether maybe you're the district librarian, maybe you're a school librarian, if you're looking at your policies and you have any chance to share input, you have school board trustees asking you, what could we do? We fully, at Texas Freedom to Read Project, 100% recommend book challenge committees. We 100% recommend them. In some places, they have one committee do all the books. Where possible, we actually do recommend the committees be different from book to book because you don't need or want the same 7 people deciding every single book, but we also realize that's not possible. It's actually really helpful to bring in different cross-sections of the community for all these books. It's really healthy because then it is community. And we fully respect the decisions these committees come up with when they are done the right way, when they require a book to be thoughtfully evaluated in its entirety, right? And there may be some committees that decide on a book to pull it that I personally disagree with, but I respect the process. I really do. Because I'm not here to make a decision on every single book individually, but when communities thoughtfully evaluate books, we have found that 99 times out of 100, the freedom to read is protected. Also really interesting, people don't want to sign their name to a book ban, by the way, right? It truly is. The number of people who want to ban the books or pull the books or censor the books is very limited. And so when you have to draw from a large group within the community, it's like 3 people, maybe. I mean, it's a lie to say this is what most parents want. They don't. And so that's why this system is so helpful, because it does get the cross-section of the entire community. So I just want to say that to school librarians. Make sure your school district has a policy in place that really allows for a really healthy and robust challenge process that really does involve, if this is going to be in the name of parental rights, and that's the argument, bring in the parents, bring in people to serve on these committees. It's a really great, and it was a really great experience, right? So that's something that I recommend to librarians, school librarians. So all 31 book challenge committees put the books back on shelves. Unfortunately, 3 of the Patriot Mobile candidates won because they had $500,000 to win. And one of the very first things they did was overturn every single book challenge process that had happened in the last 6 months, and they pulled all the books back off of shelves because they claimed that the committees were stacked with woke people. Even though it was like this random process and we had all sorts of people, and the person who challenges the book is one of the committee members, right? So you've always got that voice on there. And they undid it. They undid it all. And then my school district passed what I call a book banning rubric. They call it the book content guidelines rubric, but it's a disaster. It's this rubric now forces books that have any depiction of gender ideology, meaning even a character, I guess, cannot exist on any libraries in our school, right? And so now even when we have a book challenge committee, well, they don't have book challenge committees anymore because they use this rubric first and it pulls all the books. And that's been really devastating. One of our goals here and we're on our way, we have replaced some of these candidates or some of these trustees, is to, once we can, and we've said this from the beginning, we don't want the rubric. We want books to be thoughtfully evaluated, right? We do not want books to be reduced to a checklist because it doesn't allow us to understand context, and that's so important. So anyway, they took all the books back off of shelves. That is actually where I was propelled into where we are into the world. Again, when they got the email that said remove every one of these books from the shelves, the day before school started, by the way, every teacher in the district and every librarian got a list of these books and said, pull these from your shelves immediately. I was teaching a class. I teach fitness classes at the YMCA. I was teaching a class when that library went out, when that email went out. By the time I got home, maybe 15 educators or librarians had screenshotted that email and sent it to me. Mm-hmm. And yep. And that is how, right? Now listen, we don't want you sending these things on your district email addresses, by the way. This needs to be like screenshotted and sent. But I did. These people sent it to me. I took it to Twitter and it went viral because two of the books on that list were The Diary of Anne Frank, the graphic novel adaptation, and the Bible. And it went super viral. Before I knew it, I was on every news station I could. This was kind of at the beginning of all of it. Now, if that happened, I'd be like, oh, it happened again. The Bible was pulled again. Like, it's happened so many times. But this was like the first time it had happened in America. But that propelled me into the universe of where I am today, right? I think that's probably how the librarians found me. But I have committed myself. And again, I don't think that a sexually explicit book should be in the hands of young children. No one's advocating for that. I don't even think the Diary of Anne Frank, the graphic novel adaptation, is for elementary schools. It's not. It's not rated for them, and it shouldn't be there. And that's okay, because there is some content in there that is not appropriate for a first grader, right? I get that. We support that. None of us want young children to have access to sexually explicit material, but some of us really want to have the hard conversations about maybe books about sexual assault and consent and sex education are in fact appropriate for 17-year-olds and 16-year-olds and those who unfortunately have experienced sexual assault, right? When these books can actually be a saving grace for them because it might teach them about what they experienced. It might teach them how to protect themselves. It might help them feel valued and seen for what happened to them. Sorry, it makes me want to cry. These books are not pornography. The Poet X was lost in my children's school district, and Poet X is not pornography. It's about a young girl navigating what happened to her and her experience with her boyfriend, her experience with her mom. It's so real. And it just makes me so mad they want to take these books off of shelves.
Your advocacy from such a very amazing, raw and immediate space where you as a parent were seeing your children's education being compromised across K-12 education in your district. And as infuriating as it is, you made the active choice to become that advocate and loudspeaker for the rage, which so many people have felt, but oftentimes felt perhaps limited in what change could I possibly bring, being that one person in the room who was angry. And so I love that everything that you have done has led you to a national, you have a national spokesperson, and quite honestly, people look to you as somebody who, from the very beginning, has not shied away from doing things that are scary. And this national spotlight, which was even more made more apparent when you were on the Librarians documentary. Thank you very much. Again, I appreciate your calendar is filled with a lot of much bigger personalities who are hoping to have a few minutes of your time and your passion. And it has clearly been something that you have internalized, and this has really defined the last, 5 years of your life, because it is that important. And, I'd love to see, could you make the connection? Because the Texas Freedom to Read Project has an amazing amount of resources, and you have, over the years of being on the front lines of this, have learned a great deal, which the librarian community across this country, and I'm sorry, but it is an American thing. In some spaces, in some corners of the world, they are experiencing book banning, but for this rather unique attack that has come to literature and books in our school libraries, you have been in the front on the front line of this. Can you show us how, make that connection between your personal experience and when the Freedom to Read Project became official and a resource which we will be putting in the show notes? You have really taken your learned experience and put it in a place where other people can benefit: families, communities, librarians, and other parent activists who would like to ensure that they are doing what they can to protect their students' access to books in their school libraries.
Yes. So, the one thing you said is, what one parent, what could I do? Like how could this one thing make a difference? I remember thinking that about myself. Like if I rewind to like fall of 2021 and my friend who was an ELA teacher reached out to me about like Sora, like I was like, yeah, sure, I'll ask. But like, I don't know that like I can really change anything, which is so funny. I mean, look at where we are, right? Like literally that was my thought about myself. And look at where you and I are talking right now and how like, oh, turns out one person kind of can do something, right? And this all happened. Like it wasn't a plan. This wasn't the plan. I didn't go to that first school board meeting and speak out like, I hope to create an organization and train librarians and parents across the country how to fight censorship in their local communities. My gosh, I never thought that, but it happened. It really did, right? And here's an example. I was at a librarian screening, and I bring this up because it will tie to this, where someone raised their hand after and they said, well, I'm an ELA teacher. And like, is there an organization of ELA teachers fighting against censorship that I can join? Where should I go? And I was like, well, here, we've got the National Association of ELA Teachers, which is like what NCTE, National Teachers Speaking English, and they do some really great stuff. But like in Texas, we don't have like a ELA Teachers Against Book Banning. Like I said, turns out, and I like said it to her in the meeting. I was like, I guess you got to start it, right? It was very much like that's how this happened. There isn't one, and you're thinking, I wish there was one I could join. Well, maybe you should start it, right? And it might, but that's how this happened, right? So we tie back to that, and we go back to where Texas Freedom to Read Project really came together. And it was like the beginning when I introduced myself. I met these other parents who were doing kind of what I was doing. Interestingly, Frank Strong lived in Austin, and he wasn't in a school district where this was happening, but he was an AP English teacher, and he saw it happening from his little safe space, and it was a safe space. And this is what I love about Frank. He was sitting in a safe space in Austin. He didn't have to do this, but he was like, and his child's education was ultimately protected because he was in a safe space in Austin where this wasn't happening. But he said, no, I'm going to do something about this. And he started this book lovers guide to trustees. And he was like he was gathering all information about people running for school board. And he was making this Google Doc where he would say which ones would fight for against book banning and for the freedom to read. And he was sharing this document statewide, and it picked up. And he was just this teacher. Right? And he did that. And then Ann Russi was in a school district in Katy ISD, this huge school district with more than 100,000 students. And she was ultimately doing a lot of the same that I was doing. And that's what brought us together. And one thing I want to point out, because this is really important, Amy, because I have done a lot of scary things, but also I know I have a personality that's really like bold, and like I've always been a fighter in the sense of fighting for what's right. My whole life it's come actually kind of naturally and easy to me. And I know that it doesn't for everyone. Right? When people attack me in things I really believe in, it doesn't hurt me. It like fills me with energy. I'm like, oh, let's go. Now, if they were attacking me personally or whatever, that might be harder. But when they're attacking something I feel so passionate about, it actually fills me with energy. I know not everyone feels that way. A lot of people don't want to stand. And like my friend Ann Russi, who's the co-founder, she's very different than me. We don't have the same personality. Frank is very different from both of us. We don't, all three of us are very different people, but all three of us chose to take what our skill was, right? We took what our passion was and we worked with that. So when I speak to people who want to get involved, you don't have to be someone you're not. Don't try and be out in front of everything and the spokesperson if that's not who you are, right? So find out who you are, find out what your skill is, and embrace that. Now, and that's what led us to, and we created the Texas Freedom to Read Project. And we said, we're going to create an organization that trains and empowers and mobilizes and educates people who want to fight censorship. Whether we work with librarians every single day, we work with parents every single day, we work with grandparents. We're just going to find whoever it is that wants to fight against this, and we're going to teach you how to do it where you are. And something that we have found, and this is really important for everyone to hear, and this really ties in the librarians, we cannot fight book banning all over Texas. There are 5.5 million public school students. We have 1,200 school districts, more than 1,000 public libraries. In Texas, Frank and Ann and I cannot do what we've done in our own districts in every district or community in Texas. We don't have the bandwidth. It's not our job. It's not our place. We can't do it. And so people come to us and be like, come help us, come help us. We say, we can help you help yourself. But we cannot do it for you. We can't, right? It's like, we need you to save us. We need you to, we can't. We cannot. This is going to be fought individually in every community by people in that community who want to fight for the freedom to read. And that's what we exist to do, is to empower them and train them and give them some guidelines and help maybe coordinate and mobilize. But we can't do it. You have to speak at your city council meetings, your school board meetings. You have to join the parent councils. You have to sign up to be on a book challenge committee. Every individual listening to this has to do it themselves. Now, because so many of the people listening to yours are librarians, that's where I want to talk very specifically. So let's talk about school librarians right now, what they can do. Number one, school librarians. I need you to know your book acquisitions and your challenge policies inside and out. We now have a booth at the Texas Library Association conference that we do every year. And I'm going to be honest, and this isn't to hurt any librarians' feelings, I'm kind of shocked at the number of librarians who come through who don't know what their school district's acquisitions policy is and their book challenge process is. Like here in Texas, we call it the EFB local. That's like in Texas, every school board policy ultimately is this. It's named the same thing for libraries, and it's EFB local. The number of librarians who didn't know what we were talking about when we said EFB local, that's a problem, right? If you as a librarian, I understand you're doing your job, but this is your job too, right? This isn't a huge ask. I need you to know what your school district's acquisitions policies are and what your challenge policies are. And then I need you to follow them to exactness. And when someone wants to come in and challenge a book and they're going to cause a scene and you're worried they're going to cause a scene, or they bring you, and it would be easier to appease them quietly, and your director says, why don't we just read these 10 books to just not cause a scene, which we see all the time. Don't do it. This is where you say, hey, and I know this might take a little bravery, and this is where you have to be careful depending on, are you at the bottom of the ladder? Are you at the top of the ladder? Where are you? But it's okay for you to say to your boss, hey, this is what our library policy says we're supposed to do with challenged books. I don't know every scenario, but I need you as librarians. And if you aren't comfortable to say, hey, our policy says that when a parent challenges a book, this is how it's supposed to work. And maybe you say in an email, are you telling me we should ignore that policy? Those are the things that you need to get clear. Or maybe your boss doesn't quite realize what's happening. I mean, there's a chance, right, that they don't understand your local policy as well as they should. I don't know, but I need you to know your policy so that when this happens, you follow it to exactness. Even if your policy is terrible and you disagree with it and it's going to get more books challenged, that's okay. We can talk about that at another time where we work to change the policy. But for now, you follow it. Stop silently reading books that you think are going to get you in trouble. It has to stop. I know it's scary. I know you might be being asked to do it. And if you're being asked to do it, I need you to find a way to get it in writing, right? We have a school district in Texas that they had a big librarian meeting, right? If you all watched the librarians film, you saw that librarian in Granbury who recorded that meeting where that superintendent said, we're a conservative community, and if you don't like that, you better be quiet about it. I mean, that librarian's a hero for recording that. I'm not telling you to record everything. You don't have to. You need to know, again, here's more. You need to know in your state, are you a single party consent recording state? In Texas, you have the right to record any meeting that you are a part of, even secretly, because it's a single party consent state, right? So, but in a lot of states, you can't record unless both parties know. I'm just saying, if you're being asked to break policy, I want you to get a record of it, right? And you should be uncomfortable with that, because here's the thing, I'm here to tell you, if you break policy for them and it gets found out, chances are they're going to blame it on you anyway. You are going to take the fall anyway. No one is going to protect you, and they're going to blame it on you. And that's been really frustrating. But when they're already willing to lie, and they're already they're not, and so you will always, I'm just saying, this is really good advice. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not hiding anything. Follow your policies to exactness and keep impeccable records of it. That's our number one ask of librarians. And stop silently reading. Here's one right here. When a book challenge comes in, it should absolutely, this is unethical as a librarian, and you should all know this. If a book challenge comes in, it is inappropriate for you to read that book instead of evaluate it for a challenge. I know this is hard, and I'm not trying to be like a know-it-all. I hope, Amy, you're a school librarian, you know. Am I coming across where I think I know better than you? Because I'm not a librarian, but this should be the basic code of ethics as a librarian.
In our profession, we call it self-censorship. In order to avoid scrutiny, we have chosen against, when we make purchases to buy things, the reality is we're also choosing against to buy certain things. And so it's this kind of self-censorship. Self-censorship is the kind of censorship we oftentimes acknowledge we are guilty of committing.
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because you have to do some self-reflection, and it's scary. And when you're purchasing books, ask yourself, what are our guidelines? What are the best professional practices? And that's what you do. And really try not to make decisions that are going to keep yourself out of trouble. And you know what? If you have a terrible policy because like in Keller ISD, right? My librarians now have this rubric that they have, but I just say use the rubric. I'm sorry, we do have it, and it sucks, and I wish you didn't, but just follow the policy. We will keep records, right? This is good. These are good, because then we can come back and push against them when we see this is what you've been prevented from purchasing because of the terrible policies. But then we see it, right? So just follow your policies. And then, so I was going to tell you, there's this school district in Texas. They had this big meeting with librarians in the last few months, and they brought them all together. And one of the things that they told the librarians was, in the elementary schools, was, we want you to remove every single book that has any LGBTQ characters in it. Just take it out. They can't be in our libraries anymore. There's no law that says that. There is no policy in their school district that says that. It's simply bigotry and censorship, truly. And they're being asked to do it by the higher ups in the district. And so I'm not saying don't do it. Now, if you want to not do it and you're willing to go down in flames, you go for it. You call us. Let's go together. We'll call the news. We'll let them know what they asked you to do. You tell them you refuse to do it. You might get fired. You're willing to do that. Let's go. We will cause a scene. We love that. But also, not everyone needs to do that. And if you can't do it, don't do it. But find a way to get it in writing. Well, here, luckily, an agenda was passed out to these librarians. And it was on the agenda. And we got a copy of it. And that's the kind of things that librarians can do. If you're in this situation where you can't cause a scene, don't. Or if an email went out that had something in it, you can let us know what it was, and we can submit a public information request for it. So when we get documents like these that were given to us or we've been told about them, we then go submit a public information request, and we will submit one that has vague enough terms so that, well, and everybody knows we do this. We're not hiding this. Everybody in the state knows this is how we're getting stuff. But sorry, if you're going to ask a bunch of educators, and now they're doing it to all ELA teachers and all librarians, right? That somebody's going to share it. And then we go in and we submit a public information request, and we submit a broad information request that would encompass these documents, right? And then we get it on our own, and then we can share it publicly. But we need librarians who, if you don't have it written down, you need to find a way to get it written down, right? please get it put in an email. But you follow the policies. Just follow your policies. I can't say it enough. Please don't quietly remove books out of fear, because it's going to come back. You think you're protecting yourself, and you're not. Because then later, when they find out, even though you broke the policy to keep someone happy, you're still going to have to, and they're going to fire you anyway, because they're going to be like, you can't win. Right? So just follow your policies to exactness is really, really helpful. Another thing is when you see it happening. So I was at ALA last year, the American Library Association conference, and there was a session about censorship. And there was a librarian who got up to ask a question at the mic, and they were talking to a bunch of people who specialized in it. I wasn't on the panel. I was in the audience on the front row. And they had two questions. And the first question was, as a librarian, should I be engaging people from the community to help fight against censorship? And then they asked a second question, and their first question didn't get answered. And I'm on the front seat, and I'm like trying to be like, you got to answer her question. I'm like dying. And they weren't able to answer it. And the whole meeting ended. And I was like, the answer is yes. As a librarian, whether you're a public librarian or as a school librarian, find ways. If you see something happening in your school district and it's making you very uncomfortable and you're hearing about it behind the scenes, and you know there are people in the community, like my friend who is the English teacher who got me in all of this, she called me and said, Laney, this is making me uncomfortable. Can you look into it? Right? That's what you can do. You got to find people. You don't have to do it yourself, but you can find people. Then you have to. You cannot stay quiet about it, right? If you follow the Lano case, the Little v. Lano case, that whole case came to fruition because of Leela Little, who is a citizen in the library, who's just a person, a patron, who decided they saw what was happening. They started asking questions. They got involved, and they pushed back. And she fought like hell for that community and has really done incredible things for Texas. But it's an example. But we can't do it if we don't have the information, right? So please, in really safe ways, again, we are not asking you to break rules. We're not asking you to if you've really been asked, you can't show this to anyone, I'm not telling you need to, but you've got to find a way to connect with parents in the community who are willing to fight. We've seen this in Texas. I talk to librarians all the time. And my first question is, do you know people in the community who can fight this, who can go to bat for the library? And sometimes they'll call us first because they're afraid to reach out in the community, and then we can reach out to people in the community for them. So you might need to find some in between. I don't know what it is, but we need you as librarians to actually help, right? And we don't know what's going on unless we can talk to someone and be like, and sometimes we'll pick up a phone and call a librarian and be like, we need you to explain to us what's happening. And they're a librarian who's supposed to answer to this community. And so if you have a parent coming in, answer their questions. That's fair of you to do. If you're being asked to do things by your supervisors, ask why. Get it in writing, right? So these are hard things, but we're begging of you librarians to do it. It's really unfortunate when we stumble across, and it happens a lot, librarians are actually making it worse. And I'm not here to blame you. You have no resources. No one tells you how to do it. You're terrified you're going to lose your job. And in a lot of communities where it's really bad, you might, no matter what happens. So at least, I know that's really hard for me to say, but it really might, right? If these people are bad enough, they're going to do everything they can to replace you with someone who will just help them censor books. And that's a really hard reality, but it is true. We all have to accept that, right? And so at least pave the way and create a record so that we can come in. There's one thing we like to say. All of you are school librarians, so I know every one of your listeners knows this book. If you give a mouse a cookie. We talk about this all the time with book banners and people who are about censorship. You think, oh, let's just solve this one book for them right now, right? Let's make them happy. We'll pull this book. Just it's a little thing. We'll weed it. It won't be a problem. If you give a mouse a cookie, I'm here to tell you, they're going to ask for a glass of milk next. And after the glass of milk, they're going to, and you are going to, and it's never going to end. I promise you, you will never appease them. And they will not be happy until they can control every book on every shelf in your library. 100%. We see it every single time we help a school library or a public library in Texas, and we're in the middle of 20 of them. The story is exactly the same. It's getting easier to help because nothing changes. It's the same tactics, the same everything. So I don't know, Amy, you're a school librarian. I want you, as I'm giving this advice, and I'm talking to school librarians, I want you to ask, do you have any questions that you would think that school librarians would have? And is this advice I'm giving you, how do you feel about it? Because I know I'm not a librarian. I'm not sitting in your shoes, but I've talked to a lot. How does it sound as I hand you this advice?
Well, I think that again, for so many of us, we are dealing with the immediacy and the demands of the school we serve, the community we serve. And so much of what we know has been customized because of our immediate community that we serve and the board that we serve and our superintendent that we serve. And so for us, we are hyper scrutinizing our own select set of conditions that we operate under. And so I think that many of us have done a good job of becoming experts in our particular circumstance. And that is, hyper localized and very, very specific to our district and the school and our superintendent. And so I think that we have learned from examples and these nightmare scenarios that we hear, and unfortunately, so many of them are coming up from Texas, and the South. Is that we've had to learn that we cannot become complacent. We cannot become, we can't just sit back and say, "Oh, I'm in a safe district. I'm in a safe district." But I think that that doesn't mean that we don't need to brush up on all the things that, again, the things that you have said. When we have to, look at our look at our policies and be aware of not just the incidents that happen in the libraries, but the incidents that are going to be impacting the collections in our teachers' rooms and what is being taught and we have to be experts in not just what happens in the library, but what is happening in our schools writ large, and making sure that when it comes to our curriculum and what is being taught in our classrooms and how these organizations have tried to infiltrate at the hyper-local level to be able to control the dialogue. And I love that when you mentioned that, we don't get to turn to a national spokesperson like yourself and say, "Hey, I need you to do this." Oh, no. You're turning it back on us, because at the local level, the most impact that we can make is by the people who are being impacted. And so we absolutely, this is incumbent on us as the librarians to be able to make sure that we are equipped to make sure that we are making sure that there isn't one opportunity, because like you said, if you give a mouse a cookie, this is just going to spiral and add to if there is no momentum, giving them that one book and caving. I wrote cave. I was like, don't cave. All of a sudden,
don't give the cookie.
No, do not cave. Do not cave. You have absolutely given us the kind of ammunition that we need, and also the awareness that we don't get to sit back and say, "Oh yeah, good thing we don't live in Texas." No, because this is a national thing. This is something this is a campaign that has happened at the grassroots level of activism, making sure that on this hyper-local level. You have made this a national topic by being in this documentary and being the parent. I think are you the only person in the librarians who isn't a librarian in subject?
Well, Chris Tackett, do you remember?
Yes.
Well, Chris Tackett is the, and then he's great, a friend of mine. I've made a lot of friends in this, and it's been phenomenal.
Yes, you did.
But he's the pie chart guy.
Yes.
And then there's also Adrienne, the hairdresser. So she's also a parent. And so
loved her.
We're all friends. But I think that's it. Those are the three stories. And it's funny because the three of our paths cross all the time because we're all fighting. We all live within like 30 miles of each other. But that's such an important piece to this story, right?
Exactly.
And I can't tell you the number of librarians who have come to me to just in tears. They're just like, "Laney, you don't know how good it feels to just have somebody standing up for us. Somebody, I was somewhere yesterday at this thing called Destination Imagination for one of my kids. It's this funny program, and it's like we had to drive 40 miles away to do it, and he's doing this program and all these competitions. And this woman walks up to me who I've never met, and she says, "I think I know you." And so now I was like, and I said, "My name's Laney." And she was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm a school librarian." And she like wraps her arms around me. And she's like, Thank you for everything you've done, you know? And so like you librarians do need support. So find the people in your communities who are, and again, they don't all have to fight like me, because I know that the fighting is going to look different. And we joke, you just have to find somebody in every community who's got some sort of energy to put into this and, is willing to fight it. You said, one of the things you said, you talked about how librarians need to know what's going on in the classrooms and the curriculum and whatever. Unfortunately, you also now have to know what's going on at the state legislature, which we haven't really talked about. I'm just going to, a little piece of that. Here in Texas, they're realizing that because there are 1,200 school districts, it's really hard to ban books by school district. It's been, it's like they've kind of like saturated their whatever. So like, let's just go to the state level and just, pass all these laws to force it by the state. And here's another thing that we're seeing with school librarians. These laws are being passed. They are ridiculous. We have one here called SB 13. They don't make any sense. They are unworkable because the people who are passing them don't know how libraries work, right? An example of SB 13 is like if you buy a new book, it has to go through this whole process, right, to be approved by the community, by the school board. And they said that you determine that by the ISBN. Well, the people who made this law, they don't realize how ISBNs work. We talk to them. We're like, did you know that like a hardcover and a softcover of the same book have a different ISBN? Did you know that the library-bound version has a different ISBN than the classroom copy version? Did you know that a large print version of the exact same book has a different? Did you know that the audio book has a different ISBN? Did you know that when they make an anniversary edition of the book, that has a different ISBN? Did you know that when you have the classics like Shakespeare and different publishers are publishing them, they all have different ISBNs? Did you know that? And they were like, oh, well, we had no idea. You know what I mean? So they're passing these laws that are dumb, that are just ridiculous, that don't make any sense. They're unworkable. And then when they pass them, they're lying to the public about what's in them. This one tells you can't have any of these books. That law does not say that. You made this law because you want to get rid of all those books, but the law does not say that. But they're lying, and we see librarians and school board trustees and principals and superintendents are afraid, so they're believing them, and they're preemptively pulling all these books, but the law doesn't say it. And I know it's not your job as a librarian to become an expert on the law, but if a law passes in your state that affects school libraries or librarians, you need to read it and understand it. I know that's, or find an organization. My guess is your state library association may be doing the work. We want you to understand what that law says so that you are protecting yourself, right? That's a really big deal here. Right? And then another thing, one last thing, is public information requests and FOIA requests. You call them different things in different places, sunshine law. You may get those. These book banners are going to be asking for things. You need to fulfill them to what the law says. I know that you might be afraid. This is one of the number one reasons we're asking you to follow policy, is so that they don't catch you doing something against policy. And then you're required. Don't worry that, oh my gosh, what if I give them something that hurts us? It doesn't matter. Follow the law, follow your policy. We don't want you to get in trouble. You just need to fulfill the request. We're running into that too, where librarians are not fulfilling the request because they're afraid and they're being dishonest about it. That's actually a crime if you're destroying any records, or if you're not handing over what's being written. So just follow the law. I know it's scary, but if you follow your policies, it's not a big deal to follow the law and hand over the records. We want you to stay out of trouble. And when you are communicating with people, and I'll add this, when you're communicating with people about getting help, be careful, make phone calls. Don't necessarily put everything in writing because those might be PIR-able as well or FOIA-able. So if you need help, make phone calls rather than sending, documents through email if you can to begin with. That's going to keep you the safest. And if you don't know what to do, find someone who can answer these questions for you. Here at Texas Freedom to Read Project, we are willing to help people elsewhere. So let us know.
Well, and I do have friends who have shared with me that there are some rather clever ways to produce lawfully required, FOIA-requested copies of every book in our catalog. And there are ways to do it in which you are in full compliance, but they are almost entirely unsearchable.
You mean when I get a 10,000-page reading report? Yeah.
Yes. So friends, if you ever find yourself in that particular situation, I'm not saying you shouldn't comply. I'm just thinking you don't have to be as helpful with with the finished product, your FOIA product that you produce and share over and hand over, that which you are obligated to do, does not have to necessarily follow any prescribed format.
Well, so what's interesting is here in Texas, I think Texas has made the job in some ways easier on librarians because now school district catalogs have to be online and searchable. And in some ways that's really helpful because we don't need to be afraid of the books that are in our libraries. Let's be unapologetic, especially if you're following your policies, and let people, and then they don't have to be, it's a lot of work. I understand for you librarians, it's a lot of work,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
Transparency is your friend. It really is. I know it feels scary, but it is. So embrace the transparency by following the rules. And it really helps those of us fighting it. It helps us. It helps us. And maybe it feels like you're giving ammunition to the opposition, but it really helps those of us fighting it as well. So,
Laney Hawes, we're going to have an amazing set of resources in our show notes. What is the best way for listeners tuning in to learn more about you? Again, we're going to put things in the show notes, everything, yes. But give us, what is the best way to follow what Freedom to Read Project is doing and learn more? Because I know your story is inspiring and you are doing the amazing work of supporting what school librarians do, not just in Texas, but taking a national stand and really embracing this role with love and courage and, the kind of energy, which I don't know where you're getting this energy on Sunday morning, friend. It truly is. But I'm so grateful for this because I cannot wait to share this conversation with our listeners. What is the best way for us to learn more about your organization?
So really, the basics are our website, which is txftrp.org, and that's Texas Freedom to Read Project, TXFTRP. But really, to get to know us best, I would say follow us on Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads. We're still on X, Twitter, because that is where most of the state legislature in Texas, shares that. So for us, we have to be aware of what's happening there. But follow us on socials, get to know us, right? You might get a lot of answers to your questions there. We often do as well, like trainings and things. If you sign up for our emails, you'll be invited to those. And we're excited. We're happy to get to know you.
Well, and I don't live in Texas, but I've never turned down merch. And I sense that
we have merch.
And you have merch. And so, friends, if you do nothing today except go on and definitely invest in a little bit of the Texas Freedom to Read Project merch because it is fantastic. And I reserve one day a week to wear library/book advocacy. And then another day of the week to be school, my school pride or my union pride. But no, your merch is fantastic. And I'm telling you right now, I'm getting my credit card out and I'm going to start buying things right now. So, Laney,
thank you, Amy.
You are a delight. And I am so incredibly grateful. And I mean this because you are in demand. People with national spotlights sharing your time this Sunday morning. And truly, the state of Texas is lucky that you have taken on this, you're championing this fight. And I find you just incredibly inspiring. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I love all the national attention you're getting. And I'm so grateful because I know that there are librarians in Texas for whom they feel seen and they recognize that you are doing the work on the front lines for all of us. And we really are incredibly grateful.
Well, thank you to educators, right, and librarians for taking care of my children, right, and teaching them the joy of reading. I've always said the library is a magical place, right, and I want it to continue to be that way. And as a parent, I don't think I ever realized how much the educators that they come in contact with in their life are going to help me parent and would be such a supportive role in my children's lives. It's a pretty big deal. So it's the least I can do, right? To say thank you is to fight for that and also to fight for the other kids in my community. It's really important. So thank you, Amy. But I thank you for for what all of you do for families across America.
And, again, an important reminder, librarians tuning in right now, you have parents who, like Laney, will support you in making sure that we are doing the best for our students in our school community. Laney Hawes, I wish you a wonderful rest of you've got a school year coming to we're going into the spring, and can you believe it? And you know what? But thank you, and I look forward to our paths crossing again, hopefully at another national conference.
Yeah, yes. And that's, if you want us back on, we'll come back on. We have plenty to talk about.
Listen, I am so grateful for all you're doing. Thank you so much. And I wish you the very best. Here, sending my love from Michigan to Texas.
No, thank you. We need it.
If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. If you're curious to know how often your state or country has been featured on the podcast, simply click on the link which can be found in our show notes, search title, author, state, and country, and do a Command F search. I hope this is the year you consider being a guest on the show. Please visit the FAQs in every episode and you'll realize just how easy it is. We all have something to share. Make 2026 your time to shine. The topic of our next episode is supporting students with hidden needs and talents, and my conversation with author and school librarian Carla Collins. I hope you will tune in.